Hello, my name is Ulysses Montalvo, and this is the effects of habitat destruction and bleaching on corals. So corals Anthozoa belong to the kingdom of Animalia, and they also belong to the phylum of Cnidaria. And one important characteristic to note about Cnidaria is that they have radial symmetry, which means if you were to take one and cut it vertically down the middle, both sides will be symmetrical. Another thing, another thing to note about Cnidaria is that most of these are carnivorous creatures. They use tentacles to grab their prey, which tend to be small fish. And these range from corals to jellyfish to hydras. And they also belong to the class of Anthozoa, which are exclusively marine. Polypoid cnidarians, which include any anemone-like groups with skeletons, like corals, and those without, like sea fans and sea pens. And most of these belong to the order of Octocoralia and Hexacoralia. And they also belong to the family of Alcyonaceae, which consist of leathery or soft corals. And they also don't have any calcium carbonate skeletons. There are actually over 70,000 species of corals. Now, each coral is actually a colony of polyps, and polyps are a small sac-like animal that have tentacles surrounding their mouths. And they actually have stinging cells around them on these tentacles in order to stun their prey and eat them. There are actually two different subspecies of corals. There's Alcyonaria and Zooantheria. And Alcyonaria are those that have 8 tentacles or less surrounding them, surrounding each individual polyp. And one example of this is a sea fan, which you can see in the left picture. It sort of looks like a fan. And the zooantheria are those that have 8 and more tentacles surrounding each polyp, which is shown on your right. The right picture is a perfect example of this. And all these corals are mostly found in the southern hemisphere due to the warmer temperatures and the more tropical climate. So coral reefs are home to a wide variety of marine animals. So these thousands of different species actually use corals as shelter, protection from predators, and they also use these as breeding grounds. Uh, Up to 25% of all marine life actually depends on corals. And it's not just marine life, but over 500 million people depend on healthy coral reefs for resources from food, tourism, to coastal protection. However, it's actually threatened by habitat destruction and bleaching. So you see, coral reefs have a symbiotic relationship with a microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. And this algae actually provides corals with up to 90% of their energy. And in turn, the corals provide shelter for the algae. And they also produce the necessary compounds for the algae to undergo photosynthesis. And this is why most of the corals are actually commonly found in shallow waters. And bleaching occurs when coral releases the algae under distress. And as you can see in this picture right here, the white corals are actually those who have already undergone the bleaching process. They've already expelled the algae due to some change in the water, while the coral in the middle, the one that still has the color, is actually undergoing the bleaching process, as you can see by the white tips. However, bleaching doesn't mean that the coral itself is dead. It just means that it expelled the algae. And as I said earlier, that 90% of the energy that gets produced is due to the algae. This actually makes the coral more susceptible to mortality because it loses such a big chunk of its food. And in return, it also affects the ecosystem of the coral because the fish no longer have a shelter that hides them from predators. So what causes bleaching? Well, this relationship is highly sensitive to environmental stressors, little things from pH changes. So we know that the ocean is getting more and more acidic, which actually leads to bleaching. Another big factor that contributes to this is temperature changes. So if the temperature in the water increases or decreases, it also causes a reaction and that disrupts this really sensitive relationship. And another one is pollution. So there are microplastics in the ocean and oil spills that not only causes bleaching to occur, but it's something that can lead to destruction. And it doesn't always mean death. Some of them actually recover from this, depending on how much of the algae has been expelled. If some of them underwent partial, they have been known to recover. And there are actually some species that are more resistant to heat and other species that come back from bleaching much quicker. And you can see in this picture that before and after the bleaching occurred, you can see that before that it's colorful and vibrant, but afterwards it's completely white. Human impact also plays a large role in what's going on with corals. You see, ocean temperatures have been on the rise due to increasing carbon dioxide through human activities. And we know that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas that gets released due to certain activities like car emissions, factory factory emissions, and this greenhouse gas um, gets released into the atmosphere and it traps energy, which leads to a global increase in temperature, which in turn leads to bleaching. Up to nearly 60% of coral reefs have already been damaged due to overfishing, bleaching, pollution, and disease. And as a result, coral reefs have already been placed on critically endangered lists. This is actually one step before extinction. And you can see in this picture that this area has already undergone complete bleaching. And you see that there's no longer diverse populations of fish, which is actually causing a problem because now it disrupts the entire ecosystem. The predators no longer have any fish to eat, and humans also depend on these activities. And in conclusion, over 50% of the coral formations are estimated to disappear by 2030, and further estimates actually show that over 90% of the coral formations are estimated to disappear by 2050. And I speculate that the bleaching of corals will be disastrous and it'll impact multiple ecosystems since corals play such a large role in housing multiple species that are used for humans as food and also animals. But based on research, we could increase the population of more resistant species by relocating those species that already have heat resistance and those that bounce back faster from bleaching and introduce them into areas that have already gone complete bleaching in order to try to reverse and restore some sort of balance and try to restore the fragile ecosystems that were disrupted. There needs to be more done in order to preserve corals because it's such a vital aspect in maintaining the ocean's ecosystems. And it wouldn't just affect us, it would also affect everything in the ocean. And that concludes my presentation. So thank you for watching.